Today's part 4 of Courtside's 10-part 2019 NFL preview. And I'm talking all about the NFC West today. Can Jimmy G lead the 49ers to glory in his first year back from a torn ACL? And how will the Cardinals perform with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback? You'll have to listen to find out. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. Hello there and welcome to episode 29 of Courtside. I'm your host Andrew Cohen. We are already at part 4 of Courtside's 10-part 2019 NFL preview. If you have not done so already, go and check out parts 1, 2, and 3 of the series. I talk about the NFC East, NFC North, and NFC South. And if you're enjoying all the content, please, I'd really appreciate it if you went ahead and subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening. Just a reminder for how these episodes go. In every episode, I'm going to be talking about a single division, and I'll talk about every team in that division for 5-6 minutes each, go over 3 storylines and or players I'm going to be watching heavily throughout the 2019 NFL season, and then I'll give a projected record for each team, and again, I'll talk about all the teams in order that I think they'll come in these standings. And to predict each team's record, I've gone through, predicted every single game for the 2019 NFL season. I'm not going to get every single game right. I'm probably going to get more games wrong than right. Hopefully that's not true, but that's probably what's going to happen. But when it comes to a team's overall performance, I think I have a pretty good idea of where they're all going to stack up, how they're going to stack up against one another. And I think my record predictions are pretty darn close, if not spot on. So, again, predicting every game is giving me a really strong baseline for how I think each team will do. Now, let's get into my first place NFC West team, the Los Angeles Rams. Storyline number 1, Todd Gurley and his knee injury. I think it's a pretty obvious one to watch with this team. He was in the MVP conversation last year. Not saying he was going to win, but he was in the conversation last year. His last 2 weeks of the season, week 14, 11 rushes for 28 yards. Week 15, 12 rushes for 48 yards. So largely ineffective his last 2 games of the regular season. He missed week 16 and 17 with a knee injury. Comes back in the playoffs, great against the Cowboys in the divisional round, help the Rams win. Against the Saints, the conference championship, 4 rushes for 10 yards, and then Patriots in the Super Bowl, 10 for 35. So in his last 5 games last year, he only had one good one, and the others were pretty bad for somebody that's as highly regarded as a Todd Gurley. And even in the game where he did play well against the Cowboys, C.J. Anderson was picked up off the streets late in the year to help fill in for Gurley during his injury. C.J. Anderson outplayed Gurley against the Saints and Patriots, and even again in that game against the Cowboys, he also had 8 more carries and more rushing yards and 2 touchdowns to Gurley's 1. So late in the year, it kind of seemed like it didn't really matter who they were plugging into that offense. For the Rams, it was just every single running back they were plugging in there was being effective, but not Todd Gurley, which I found really interesting. Clearly, his knee has had a huge impact. I hope he comes back this year healthy and ready to go. I think they're going to do a little bit more load management. They're not going to give as many carries and receptions per game. And here's the thing. They have Gurley signed to this huge contract that doesn't even kick in until next year, which I think it bolsters my argument for not paying a running back. And they're going to be paying Jared Goff a ton of money next year as well, and maybe they consider giving him an extension. So hopefully Gurley's looking pretty good this year, because there's already concerns about the long-term health with that knee. So hopefully he comes and plays well this year, but it's something that you're going to have to watch throughout the season. Storyline number 2 is the offensive line, specifically at left guard and center, because this offseason, the Rams let 10-year veteran center John Sullivan. They let him walk in free agency. He's still a free agent. He started all 16 games last year, started 15 games in 2017 for the Rams, so he's been a steady part of the O-line for the past couple years. They also let Roger Saffold. They let him go. He signed a 4-year deal with the Tennessee Titans, so he's gone. He started 16 games last year, 15 starts each of the 2 seasons prior to that. So, he was drafted by the Rams. He's been on that offensive line for years and years and years. And now, for those 2 guys, they're putting in 2018 4th-round center Brian Allen, 2018 3rd-round left guard Joseph Noteboom, I think is how you pronounce it. And those guys are going to come in to fill the large hole left by the departure of Sullivan and Saffold. So, last year the Rams were tied for the 8th fewest sacks in the league. Just had 33 sacks, so that's pretty good. But I would expect that number to rise with putting in 2 second-year guys right in the middle of that offensive line. They do have some guys, outside of them. They're pretty good. Andrew Whitworth at left tackle, Austin Blythe at right guard. I believe it's Rob Havenstein at right tackle. So they have some good veterans outside of those two, but it'll be really interesting to see how they fill in the hole left by Sullivan and Saffold. And finally, the player that I'm really interested with this team to watch. Right, I already mentioned Gurley, of course. Obviously, we'll be looking at Jared Goff, the quarterback, but Marcus Peters on the defensive side of things. So last year, heading in the offseason before the 2018 season, Chiefs and Rams struck a deal. The Rams got Marcus Peters in a 2018 6th rounder, which I think they went ahead and traded, but Chiefs ended up getting a 2018 4th rounder, 2019 2nd rounder, drafted a pair of defensive backs. We'll see if they can make an impact this year, but overall, I mean, it seems like a pretty good trade at the time for one of the game's top corners. Peters was an All-Pro in 2016. Again, he was a shutdown corner with Kansas City. I believe the reason they moved on from him was work ethic and problems with that. So, I mean, that's never something you want to have in a player on your team, but the Rams took a chance on him. In his first season with the Rams, he was bad. There's really no other way to put it. He's not a shutdown corner anymore. He gave up a lot of big plays. I remember that game against the Saints. He gave up a huge play to Michael Thomas. And again, you just look at how the Rams stack up against these other teams in the NFC, these top teams. You would like to see their defense be really good and really strong. And I think Marcus Peters, he needs to play at an elite level for this defense to really be one of the best in the NFC. Contract year this year for Peters. If he returns from his Kansas City form, he could really help this defense really get himself a big contract. But if not, it's going to really hurt himself and the Rams here in 2019. But anyways, for a projected record, I have the Rams at 12-4. To me, overall, it's still the most talented roster in the NFC West, at the very least. Much more talented than the other 3 teams. I think they're far above the Seahawks, Niners, and Cardinals. If the O-line doesn't fall off and Gurley can have a strong return from his knee injury, I see the Rams as one of the best teams in the NFC. All right, let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks, who are finishing second in the NFC West division this year. Biggest thing with this team, it's really their identity is the running game. Seahawks had the most rushing yards in the league last year by over 100 rushing yards, I believe. They have plenty of capable backs with Chris Carson. They have 2018 first rounder Rashad Penny. They also have J.D. McKissick and C.J. Prosise, who have had some big games for Seattle in the past and hope to make an impact again this year. And it's going to be interesting to watch this team because the question is, can a team in the modern NFL have success being, run-first team? And when I say success, I mean Super Bowl contender, right? Winning division, but competing for a bye in the playoffs. And that's what I want to watch with this team, right? Offensively, can they put up numbers that are similar to those types of teams, or can they themselves compete at that level? Now, I will say this: the Rams and Patriots, the 2 teams that played in the Super Bowl in 2018, were both in the top 5 in terms of team rushing yards last year. So, right, you can run the ball, you can have a quote-unquote run-first offense and still be effective, but both those teams are also in the top 10 in terms of passing yards. Right, we know with the Rams, they have Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, they had Cooper Kupp for half a season. Todd Gurley was very effective out of the backfield, catching balls. Patriots, Edelman, they had Gronkowski last year, wasn't amazing, but they still had him. Right, they also had Josh Gordon for a handful of games. They had James White out of the backfield, who was really good. So, right, there was some talent there on both teams offensively when it came to receivers. But with those teams, they could win games where running the football, when they were struggling to run the football, they could still win games. Both teams proved that. The Seahawks, meanwhile, need the running game. It's a necessity for them to win games in order for their offense to function. But they need their receivers to step up, which is why for the storyline number 2, I'm watching the wide receivers. We know how good Russell Wilson is, so we know he's going to help in the passing game. Obviously, he's going to be good in the passing game. We don't know what the receivers are going to look like this year, though, because Doug Baldwin, who's been there for years, been one of Russell Wilson's favorite go-to targets. He's retired. The best receiver there is Tyler Lockett now. Tyler Lockett's the number 1 receiver right now. Most established guy, has been there the longest. Here's the problem. He never had more than 5 receptions in a single game last year. only had 7 targets once. I think it was in week 2. Never had more than 7 targets. So his max production last year was 7 targets, 5 receptions. And he was very efficient on those catches. He would, pick up huge gains often. But can you trust him to be a number 1 receiver? He hasn't proved it yet. Right? He got into this team because he was a good return guy. So we'll have to see. Can he step up? Or is it going to need to be somebody like 2019 second rounder DK Metcalf, who's been dealing with injuries? Or is it going to be 2019 fourth rounder Gary Jennings, who's largely unproven, right? Whoever it is, it doesn't really matter, but somebody needs to step up in order for this team to contend for the playoffs. And number 3, I want to focus on Ezekiel Ansah on the defensive line. So last year, Frank Clark was one of the Seahawks' best defensive players. He's been one of the past few years, he's been one of their best defensive players. And he's gone. He went to the Chiefs in free agency. You look at his stats last year, they're awesome. I mean, 13 sacks, 27 quarterback hits, 3 forced fumbles, even had an interception out of nowhere. So, huge impact on that Seahawks defense. I think Seahawks defense overall was kind of middle of the pack in everything, whether it be pass defense, rushing defense, scoring offense, sacks. They were middle of the pack in all of it. And I think he really raised the level of play on that defense. So he's gone. He's being replaced by Ezekiel Ansah, who I believe is 30 years old now. The Seahawks signed to a 1-year, $9 million-ish deal. So, right, contract year for him, essentially. Ziggy Ansah had an injury-riddled 2018 season, only played in 7 games, only started 2 of those. And the real question is, what version of Ziggy Ansah are we getting here? Are we getting the 2015 Pro Bowler who had 14 sacks, forced 4 fumbles, had 34 quarterback hits? Or 2017 when he had 12 sacks? Or is that the version we're getting? Or is it 2016 where he only had 2 sacks in 13 games? We're not really sure. He's recovering from a big injury, right? I think it was a shoulder injury, I want to say. So if it could be the 2015, 2017 top-end, defensive end version of himself, yeah, he can help fill the hole left by Frank Clark. But if not, it's a huge hit to the Seahawks defense. They also don't have their starting defensive tackle, Jaron Reed, for the first 6 games. I believe it was personal conduct policy. So he's suspended for 6 games. So Ziggy Ansah needs to have a big year. My projected record here is 9-7. I think the team is solid. Right? They have a good running game. They have pretty good coaching. Middle of the pack defensively. But I think there's potential there. They have a lot of guys that are young and on the up and up. Really good quarterback. Question marks at receiver, though. Overall, I think the Seahawks are good. And something I've been preaching a lot throughout these episodes is to win games against teams that are better than you. You want a good run game. You want to control the clock, control the pace of the game. You want a good defense. Right? You need to be able to get stops and key moments. That's what the Seahawks have. That's what their team is kind of built around. But I don't think it means they're going to be this elite team that's beating all these top-end opponents all the time. So, again, I have the Seahawks at 9-7. I just can't see them finishing with more than 9 wins. Let's talk a little San Francisco 49ers, shall we? Obviously, the key guy to watch here is Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, whether you care about the 49ers or not, it's a really interesting storyline to follow this year. Coming off the torn ACL, the only footage we have of him right now is preseason. Looked terrible against the Broncos, bounced back against the Chiefs. I don't personally take much from the preseason here with Jimmy G, but I would say this, at least he improved and he didn't get worse. Right? Had it been the other way around, I think I'd be a little bit more concerned. But the most recent film we have on Jimmy Garoppolo is him looking pretty good, albeit against a pretty weak Chiefs defense. But I believe in Jimmy Garoppolo. I do. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback in this league. I do think he's going to have his struggles, though. Coming off the torn ACL, we've seen guys like Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz have their struggles returning from this major knee injury. But I do think there will be a point in the season where he hits his stride. I think it will be at least a few games in, but he'll hit his stride, start helping this team win games a lot more consistently. And, here's the thing. Last year, coming into the year, on my NFL preview, I tried to temper the expectations a little bit on Jimmy G. Just because everyone was, going crazy about him based on the fact that, he finished, 5-0 with the 49ers as a starter in 2017. I said, whoa, hold up. He wasn't playing great opponents. They were all either bad teams, they were way out of the playoff picture, or they were in the playoff picture, but they were so set in their seed that they're just resting all their starters. I think he threw 5 picks in those 5 starts, so I had my concerns about him. So now coming off the injury, right, those concerns still exist. Like, I'm not looking at him as a top 10 quarterback, but that's the thing. He doesn't need to be a top 10 quarterback for the team to succeed. They have enough talent around him to win games, even if he's just, like, let's say, top 20. But again, I do think Jimmy Garoppolo hits his stride at least a couple weeks in, and then he starts helping this team really start to win some football games. I think that the thing, too, is that the season is going to start off with Bucks, Bengals the first 2 weeks. Now, those are both road games, but those are some fairly weak defenses that he'll be able to get going with right away. So I think that's going to help him settle in and hit his stride into the season. Storyline number 2, there are a few big-name defensive newcomers for this team. We got, in terms of pass rush, they got edge rusher D Ford. They signed him to a big 5-year, $85 million contract. Last year with Kansas City, 13 sacks, and then led the league with 7 forced fumbles, which is just insane. They also drafted Nick Bosa with a 2nd overall pick. So the pass rush, the pass rush last year was bottom 10. This year, it might be top 10. I mean, these are 2 huge talents that they've added to that group, alongside DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. So they got some guys there already, and you're adding 2 elite pass rushers, is what it looks like. They also signed linebacker Quan Alexander away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Linebacker depth was a huge problem for the 49ers last year. They only had one guy start consistently. That was 2018 third-rounder Fred Warner. So he was a rookie, and he was the only guy that was starting consistently at linebacker last year with injuries and off-the-field issues with a guy like Reuben Foster. So I think that was kind of maybe the biggest problem with the defense last year was that linebacker depth. I think Alexander really helps that. I will say this. Played 6 games last year, tore his ACL, though. After those 6 games, he was out for the year. Still kind of on the mend from that. He did just start playing, and I think he's going to play week 1, at least as of now. But it is something that the 49ers are going to be wary of as the season progresses. Finally, storyline number 3, and this is my biggest concern with the 49ers this year. It has nothing to do with them, but it's just their schedule starting with week 12. So here's the thing. I had the 49ers at 7-3 heading into week 12. And that in week 12, they play the Packers, right? So again, starting with the game against Green Bay, schedule gets very difficult in week 12. Here it is, right? Versus Packers, at Ravens, at Saints, versus Falcons, versus Rams, at Seahawks. I have 5 of those teams finishing over 500. All in the playoff race when they face the 49ers. Now, the only team I have in there less than 500, and I'll talk about them once I get to their episode, I have the Ravens at less than 500. And I have the 49ers beating them. So the Niners are good, but they're not on the level of Green Bay, New Orleans, Atlanta, the Rams, right? They're not on that level. In projected record here, I have them at 8-8. I only have them going 1-5 in these last 6 games. And yeah, they could prove me wrong. They could beat the Rams at home. Maybe they beat the Packers at home. I don't know, but it's hard to see them getting through that stretch without losing at least 4 of those games. So again, I have them at 8-8. I think the final record's misleading, though, because I do think it's going to be a good season. They'll just run into some really good teams at the end of the year. Maybe, there's an injury or 2 on the offensive line or on the defensive side of the ball, and they'll be a little bit weaker. Right? You just don't know. Again, Packers, I have them 7-3 heading into week 12, 8-4 heading into week 14. So they're looking good. They're in line for a playoff spot heading into week 14. And again, the schedule just gets really tough down the stretch. That's just a tough stretch of games. You don't really get a break. And again, even the Ravens game, which is the worst team, right? The two lowest winning percentages I have them facing are the Ravens and the Seahawks. Both those games are on the road. Right? The last game, I have both the Seahawks and 49ers heading into it with an 8-7 record, but I give the edge to Seattle with them being at home and having more big game experience. But I think this year's going to show a lot of promise for the 49ers and for Jimmy Garoppolo specifically. I see the 49ers opting into the contract after the year I think he's going to have. And I think, again, there's going to be a lot of players in this 49ers team that really impress us and leave us with a lot of hope for the future. And let's finish off this episode with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, here's the thing with the Cardinals. Rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. In the NFL since 2000, there have only been 9 cases where a team has a rookie head coach and starts a rookie quarterback week 1. Also, interestingly, all these instances have come starting in 2008, so it's a pretty recent trend here. 4 of those 9 teams made the playoffs, 5 of them didn't. Now, I'm not going to focus on each individual team because I think that would get a little bit boring. But here's the other thing, too. All of these coaches were coaches in the NFL for years before becoming a head coach. The only exception is really Doug Marrone, and he was the head coach of the Bills in 2013. That was his quote-unquote rookie NFL head coach season. He had been the head coach of Syracuse for the previous, 4 years. But before that job at Syracuse, he had been a coordinator in the NFL for 7 years. So he still had 7 years of NFL experience as a coach before becoming the head coach of the Bills in 2013. So there's not any history right now that we can look back at and really point to. Rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, head coach has no NFL head coaching experience, no NFL coaching experience. He was only a college coach, played in the league for 1 year. He had been on training camp rosters and whatnot, but he's not very entrenched in the NFL. Right, very entrenched in football, not very entrenched in the NFL. And I will say this. It's interesting, and again, it could go either way, right? But I don't have a great feeling just about the overall lack of experience, right? And it's like, Larry Fitzgerald has been in the league for longer than Cliff Kingsbury has been coaching, which I think is just crazy. But again, I have a poor feeling about the lack of experience there in Arizona. Storyline number 2, I want to look at David Johnson a lot this year because, you can focus on the obvious, right? Kyler Murray and the young receivers, right? You can focus on that. I want to look at David Johnson because in 2016, this guy was arguably the best running back in the league that year. 293 carries for 1,240 yards, 16 touchdowns, I had 80 receptions for 879 yards, 4 touchdowns, first team All-Pro running back. He was amazing that year. Right, really built up the momentum he built up at the end of 2015. We had a couple really crazy games for the Cardinals and really contributed there. 2017, hurts his wrist in the first game. He misses the entire year. And now last year he returns. It's a new head coach. It's a new quarterback. New offensive system. And he struggled, right? He was okay. Overall, you look at the stats, like, he wasn't that bad, but he was not the David Johnson we'd all come to know in the first couple years of his career, right? He was not living up to those expectations. I think his struggles had a lot to do, though, with the O-line and the specific system he was in where he was really poorly utilized. And because, again, right, same thing this year, right? Comes in, new head coach, new quarterback, new offensive system. It's the exact same thing. But it feels like this system's focused more on offense and getting David Johnson the ball, whether it be running the ball, out of the backfield, catching it. So I expect him to bounce back this year, and I really want to watch that because I think he is going to return to his status as one of the best few running backs in the NFL. And finally, the third storyline kind of relates back to the idea of inexperience for this Cardinals team. It's the new offensive system, right? There's been a lot of hype surrounding this offensive system, right? There's been a ton of hype. They're not even using it in the preseason, right? They're saving their quote-unquote real offense for the regular season. That's an interesting idea, right? It's an interesting idea. We'll see how it pans out, but right, it's going to be fast-paced. It's going to be exciting to watch, right? The air raid offense, right? It's going to be really fun to watch, right? But if it's fun to watch, right, does it result in wins? And that's the biggest question here for this Cardinals team. Now, I just worry, though, about a brand new offense, rookie quarterback, 3 of the top 5 receivers are all either rookies or second-year guys. They just signed Michael Crabtree, who now fits in there, but he has to learn the system now. Just as much as these other guys have to learn, but a lot of youth there offensively, both in terms of players and coaches and just philosophy offensively. It's all very new, and we'll have to see how it pans out this year. I have the Cardinals at 3-13, but like the 49ers, it's a little bit of a deceiving record because I think it's going to take some time for the team to hit its stride, mainly on the offensive side of things. Again, there's just a ton of youth on that side of the ball, a ton of inexperience. To me, they don't stack up well against their teams in their division. They're not even on the same level as the 49ers and Seahawks, and they're not even on the same level as the Rams. So they're a couple levels away from being with those teams. Can they beat them in one game? Sure. But overall, they're not on that level. I think even though the Cardinals' win total by the end of the year won't be that impressive, I think they'll be entertaining to watch. And you look at them and see there's a lot of promise for the future, whether it be with Kyler Murray, whether it be with the offensive system, some of those receivers, David Johnson returning back to form. So I think they are going to establish themselves by the end of the year and be a team that I think will be really exciting to watch in future years down the road. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. If you enjoyed, make sure to check out parts 1, 2, and 3 of the 10-part 2019 NFL preview here on Courtside. Tomorrow we're going to be talking all about the AFC East. Of course, the Patriots seem to be firmly in the lead, but can the Jets actually compete for a playoff spot this year? Come back tomorrow to find out. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening. Follow it on Twitter. Link will be in the description below. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I'll see you next time.